Today we are painting a very easy pumpkin pie. We're going to paint the whole pie as well as a slice of pie. So if you are a beginner and you are wanting to paint something for Thanksgiving or just to celebrate the fall season, this will be a great one for you. I do keep it very simple. Hello everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Teresa. I'm a surface pattern designer and watercolor artist. The first thing we need to do is mix up our paints. So I'm going to give you the formulas that will give you a really nice pumpkin pie shade as well as pastry. First, I am going to take some yellow ochre and add plenty of water to it because we're going to need a lot. So I'm just trying to get a good base here for our pumpkin filling. So this is Daniel Smith Raw Sienna and some Winsor & Newton cadmium-free orange. And we want plenty of that to give it a nice pretty orange color with a little bit of a brown base. Now I'm not using a lot of this raw sienna. I just want to have it on hand there. I'll let it mix a little bit with it. And you can just play with this mixture until you get the color that you want. You know, a lot of real pumpkin pies are more brown than orange, but I like painting my pumpkin pies with a little more orange, just to make it obvious it's pumpkin pie. Let's test it out, see how this looks. I like that. That's good. And I don't want to waste this paint, so I'm really going to scrape as much as I can off because I've taken some of this, well, the raw sienna and the orange came straight from the tube, so it's very easy to waste paint when it's straight from the tube like that. Now the base of this pastry is going to be just straight yellow ochre, but we want some browning on our pie filling. So I am going to use the raw sienna and a mixture of raw sienna and burnt sienna to give that nice toasty browning color. And there's no yellow ochre in this mixture, but our base for the pastry when we paint it will be yellow ochre. So let's test that out. Okay, I think that's probably good. So see, this is just straight yellow ochre. That will be our base for the pastry. So I think those colors are good. Now let's just get an idea about what we're going to do. So this is fabric that I made a long time ago when I first started surface pattern designing. And in fact, this fabric is what got me started in it. So I'm looking for what kind of an edge do we want to put on our pie. This is the pumpkin pie that I did back then. I do want today to put a larger than this pastry pumpkin in the center. Probably not going to go quite as orange. It helped on the fabric to do this very orange so that it was obvious what kind of pie it is. And I'm thinking let's not do this kind of an edge because that's a lot of little crevices for us to paint in, and I'm trying to keep this very, very simple. So something, see that is not going to, that's going to take a little bit more work to get that like that. And we don't want to do this lattice work. Let's do, this is a decorative edge, but what I like about this one, the inside is just a circle. So I think that will work really well for our pumpkin pie today, because that will make painting the inside much easier. And then we can come along the edge and do this decorative work after. So let's do this edge with a pumpkin pie in the middle and a big pumpkin in the center. And this is a tea towel that I made with my fabric. This has been washed many, many times. This is cotton linen. It is worn very, very well. I love this tea towel. So Spoonflower sells this fabric, and I have one more of these on my website if you want it, that I made. But you can also order from Spoonflower. You can order yards of fabric. They do have some home goods where they actually sew it for you if you don't want to sew it. So they have things like pillows and comforters and tea towels and that sort of thing. So I'll put links down below so you can see. Now I've actually kind of cleaned out my shop quite a bit, and I'm actually going to delete a few more things coming up soon. And I will replace all of that. First of next year, I'll start working on more fabrics to put back in my shop. But this one's not going to go away. I love this one. This is a really good seller. And I love it also because it was my first fabric that I ever did. So I'll put those links below. I'm using a plastic plate to give me a nice round shape. And I'll leave a good margin on all the sides to allow room for our decorative crust. Okay, that should be about right. And over here, I want to paint a slice of pie, so I'll leave room for that. I'm using an HB pencil to very lightly trace around it. And then I'll just freehand a pumpkin shape in the middle so that we can paint around that. Since this is a pastry pumpkin, it doesn't have to be perfect, because with pastry pumpkins, you know how when you put them in the oven and bake them, any pastry thing like this is going to get kind of deformed a little bit. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting this perfect. Okay, so I'm going to use a mop brush. This is my Da Vinci number 3, just because this is a fairly large area, and I want to make sure that it does not dry too fast. And the best way to do that is to use a mop brush. So let's get it loaded up here with our orange mixture, our orange and yellow ochre. And our raw sienna and burnt sienna is getting mixed in there, but I don't really care. That's okay. You know, because a pumpkin pie can have varying colors. And I'm going to start at the top and just go around. It doesn't have to be exact. You know, pies are not perfectly round. I'll just make sure we don't cover that. So I'm really not going to worry about this too much. We just want to get it completely covered. Oops, and I almost went over that pumpkin. Can't see that stem very well, so that's okay. You know, if you want your pumpkin pie darker, by all means, just add a little more of the, you could add burnt umber to it, or raw sienna, more yellow ochre. You can just play around with your color and get it the color that you want it. the tricky part here is you don't want to go back over that area. Once, oopsie, I got a little brown, a little too much on that. It's all right. Just looks like the pie got very done there. Once you leave that area, don't go back over it. So the hard part, as I was starting to say, is getting this whole area covered while it's still wet. So I don't want to touch that again because that will mess it up. All right, so that's the big tip. Don't go back over where you've already been. You know, if something really messed up that we needed to go back, we would wait until it's completely dry and then you could go back over it. And if we want to make it brighter, that would be a good time to do it, is do a light wash over the top to bring the vibrancy back. Okay, that's dry now. I'm very happy with that. I love how it looks like a real pie. You know, it's got some darks and some lights. Part of that is because I did not completely mix up the paint on the palette, and I left this little blob here so that it would continue to leak into the pigment mixture, and that gives it some differences. Instead of mixing it together thoroughly so that it's one smooth color, things like that allow some differences in your mixture. So there's one little part here. I really don't like this. So I am going to try with my number 2 Silver Ultra Mini brush. These are fairly new to me and I really like them. My standard has been for a while the Grabby detail brushes that all come in a set, and those are very good. But I purchased these because somebody on Instagram was talking so highly of them that I decided, okay, well, I'll try those too. And I have to say, I really like them. So I'm just going to make that a little bit more of a rounded edge. And I think that's just fine because it's a little, I took it from over here where there's more of the raw sienna than the orange, just so that it looks like it's a little toasted area. Okay, I'm gonna wait for that. And actually, you know, we could fill in those little white dots the same way, because you know how some pies, especially a creamy pie like this, will get little dots, little air bubbles in it. So we could actually add a little bit of those. Next, I'm going to just fill in this whole pumpkin area with yellow ochre. Just plain, straight, watery yellow ochre. And then we will add some other little touches to it to give it definition and some toasting. But the base is a very thin yellow ochre. And I want this to stay wet and light while I get it. And this is a number 8 round Princeton Velvet Touch brush, but you can use anything you want. I just dipped my brush in a little more water, and I could have erased those pencil marks, which I meant to do and I forgot, because I really don't need them now. I just needed them for the outside of the pumpkin area. Now I'm going to take my raw sienna and burnt sienna mixture while it's still wet. Oops, that's a little too much. And just give it some definition. Draw in those segments and notice how that darker brown just makes it look like it's been in the oven. And because it's still wet, it's bleeding out and giving us that nice watercolor blending. And I want to be sure to do the outside edge, because if this were a piece of pastry, it would get toasty on that outside edge as well. And that covers up our pencil lines very well. And you can make it as toasty as you want. Okay, now while we wait for that to dry, all we have to do is the same thing, only going around the outside, making those little scallops. So we're going to take yellow ochre, and I want to get it really watery. Move that so I don't put my arm in it. And I want this light, so I'm just placing my brush down and making a scallop. And then let's do another scallop. And we want them to be about the same width and height. But you know, since we're freehanding it, it's not going to be perfect. And every once in a while, let's go back. We want them to be a little different from each other. And we want some toasting in there. So some will be a little darker, some will be a little lighter. And as they dry, we'll go back and put more texture in with them. I don't know about you, but when I am baking a pie, I can never get all these things perfect. So they're all lopsided and a little different than the one that came before it. So let's just test this out, see. We can also go back after it's dry to add some details. But I like to try to get some in there while it's still wet. I'm speeding this up because it took a while to do this, and it really got quite boring when I started watching it in editing. So to spare you that, I'll just speed it up and tell you what I did. So I did exactly the same thing that I did with the pumpkin pastry in the center, using the same colors. And once I made it all the way around, then I took a little bit more concentrated pigment and just drew some little lines, some little curved lines on each scallop. And I actually went around and did that 2 or 3 times until I got it as dark as I wanted it. And you know, I made some of them darker than others. And then I went back over the top with a little light wash of the darker mixture of the burnt sienna and raw sienna. And you could even add burnt umber if you wanted it a little bit darker. But that's what I'm doing right here, is just putting some darker spots to make it look more realistic. Now for our slice of pie, which actually I guess I could have left a slice out of this pie since we're doing a slice, but that's okay. Maybe we had two pies. Our scallops like this. The bottom of the crust does not get nearly as brown as the top of the crust does. So I want this very light. And now for the inside of the pie, I'm first going to start with a little buff and I'm mixing a little buff with our orange and yellow ochre mixture. Buff just to dull it down a bit, and I'm just going to stipple it on to give some texture. And it's okay if it goes over a little bit in either direction, that's just fine. And now I'm using my round brush, by the way. Now I'm just going back to that same mixture we used for this. The yellow ochre and orange mixture. Because I want this to be rough edges. So that's fine. It's not going to be smooth. I don't want it smooth. And I'm just going to fill up that whole space. And then I want to add a dollop of whipped cream on top. And so the way that we need to do that is by using a very opaque bleed-proof white. I like Dr. Martin's. So let's get a little plate to put this on, because we want to thin it out just a little bit. So let me get a I'm going back with a little bit of raw sienna. A little bit of a shadow where those swirls would be. hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did. That should give you a good start for painting pastries and pies and things like that. If you enjoyed this one, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I have a lot more great watercolor videos coming up soon. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you next week.